Welcome to Committee of the Whole for March 5th, 2024. And we'll go ahead and get started with roll call. Melissa, can we have roll call, please?
Council President Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce. Councilmember Boyd.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer. Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Troutner.
Here. Thank you, Melissa. Any changes to the agenda? No changes? May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Motion passes. All right. First up, we have approval of minutes for February 20, 2024. May I have a motion for approval of minutes, please?
So moved.
Second. All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those nays? Motion passes. Thank you. And we have a motion for payment of bills, please.
Madam Chair, I move to move forward with payment of bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Motion passes. And next up, we have City of Kent's federal agenda, and we have Pat's already here.
Crazy. All right, so good evening, Council. We're here to talk to you about an issue that the city staff have been working on. Got the slideshow going. So back in 2023, the Council approved a budget provision for us to hire a federal lobbyist. We had a federal lobbyist on board for a long time. We stopped using the federal lobbyist after a while because there was, because of change in the federal government, there was no reason to use the federal lobbyist because there was no funding available. That funding recently became available again, and so back in 2023, the Council approved the process for retaining the federal lobbyist. So what we do is we utilize a lobbyist, in our case, a particular lobbyist who worked for the Murray Murray's office for quite a long time in the past. Ben McMakin, in the firm that he works for. And what he does is he helps us pursue federal appropriations from the federal government. He advises us on strategies for getting direct appropriation. So this isn't traditionally the grant funding, it's just direct federal appropriation through the budget process. So he helps communicate with the delegation that serves the city and the state of Washington and help us align our requests with the interests of our federal delegation. We have been working with him over the past many months. We had our ELT staff meet with him and talk about some needs that we have that might be right for federal appropriations, and utilized his services to kind of narrow down some requests that we think would be successful. And we're here to talk to you kind of high level about the three that we've really zeroed in on. And those three are: one for infrastructure, and that's involving the Mill Creek Middle School; one for education that Bill Ellis will talk about in more detail; and then we have a public safety related request that Chief Hemmond will be here to talk about. I just want to give a shout out to Bill, who's going to be up next to talk about this. He's really shepherded us through this process. He's done a tremendous amount of work in all three of these areas, and we wouldn't be here without his expertise in this area and his hard work here. So we're really on the front end of this. I can tell you that nothing's going to happen if the federal government can't pass a budget. So once that happens, the process opens up, and then we can start applying for funding, and Bill's going to talk about that in more detail for you now. So thank you.
Hi, Council. Thank you, and thank you, Pat, for the nice comments. I am going to talk about the three different lanes of direct appropriation request, and I just also want to, before I get going on those three areas, mention that there's the congressional direct appropriations path, and then there also are grants, and so This is not the be-all and end-all of Crossroads advice to us. You'll notice also on the screen here, the last bullet, I've talked at length at council last year about the air and space strategy we did with King County. So, Ben will help me talk to companies, talk about the Kent Valley, and to our federal delegation as well for the aerospace industry that we have here that's so meaningful. I want to just dive into the first bullet here, which is education. So we've been playing a convening role with our educational partners, both Green River College and Renton Tech College, as well as Kent School District. And we also talked to apprenticeship programs. We had a meeting just this afternoon with AJAC, which is our Advanced Manufacturing Apprenticeship Program here in town. So there's a lot of different educational entities. They all are requested for funding asks out of the different federal delegations offices. For Adam Smith's office will come and talk to every educational partner. Senator Murray's office will, Senator Cantwell's office will. And so I think what the city has an opportunity to do here is to look at that landscape of requests from our educational partners and help coordinate to a strategy over time. You'll hear more on the 26th at the Joint Council Kent School District Board meeting about our project with the Kent School District that the City Council funded to create a career technical education and STEM education plan with the school district, and we'll go into greater depth at that time. You'll hear that again on the next request as well. But for today, I just want to outline that this is a priority, and I've talked a lot in all of my ECD updates, I hope, about the importance of education and workforce training to having to working on issues of income equality, responding to our employers' urgent request that we have more trained individuals in their industry areas in our town. So this request is support, not that the city would be making for our funding for ourselves, but supporting the request of someone else. So Green River College Foundation is working with Washington Alliance for Better Schools, who also works with many other school districts, including Renton and Kent School District. And they're going to be pursuing about $1 to $2 million in funding next cycle, should Congress open it up again, for a parent academy, for family, college, and career navigators, advising for youth, education, leadership, data, and accountability. And a lot of these items will be crosswalked, or I can align them to things that, just a little out of order here on the 26th with our CTE plan with the school district. I really wanted to spend the bulk of my time, though, talking about, I think, a very important project to support, which is Kent School District's Mill Creek Middle School, which has a propensity to flood. You can see very clearly here with the sandbags, and it really has a terrible impact on the students who go to school there. But something I've heard in the past from businesses nearby, Lohorta Market, for instance, in the image on the left, you can see the aerial drone. This was taken this year. A lot of this flooding has to do with sediment in Mill Creek. However, things that the school district might want to do to address, like elevate the field or make different treatments to the field, will trigger very costly, very expensive infrastructure on their own site, no matter what happens to the sediment in the creek, because the FEMA lines that are on the map will not disappear with whatever is done with the creek. If you want to elevate, it will trigger a permit requirement from the federal government for floodwater compensatory storage. In the meantime, I just want to talk more about the impacts on students in this area and give you a little context of where the site is. So the school today is 1 block from the federal funded Sounder train system. It is 1 block from the I line. It is ringed on 3 roads by each one of those numbers there, 31,000, 26,000, 33,000 cars. That's 2018 traffic count data of how many cars go by every single day this school. I've talked to Puget Sound Air Quality. They used to have an air monitoring station 1 block away. The particulate matter for diesel is quite high in this area for this, and the impact on the school is significant. If you look at the catchment area for where students will be requested to walk to school rather than take a school bus, so about 70% of the students who go to this school walk every day. You also look at the census data for that catchment area on the left, where students are walking and biking. About 50% of the households of those students are drawn from have 1 car or less, or no cars at all in that household. So the walking routes to and from this school are incredibly important. The walking routes, when flooded, one of the things that we've heard from through the school district and from students is you're attending school all day with wet, cold feet. what is your ability to focus and study and learn? So this is a real impact, and we talk a lot about education, as I did earlier, and supporting efforts for that. It's undermined if the conditions at the school are not conducive to learning. So just a little bit more on the profile of the area. We have 853 students there between the grades of 6th and 8th grade. We have over 50 countries represented amongst that student body. It's a very diverse school district. It's a very diverse school within the Kent School District, as these pie charts show. Sorry for the small font. Something I want to draw your attention to, of course, though, is free and reduced lunch. 71% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. And so if the federal government is making investments in this area for transit, is making investments in this area and free and reduced lunch for students, it's undermined if the school district cannot achieve improvements to the school without very costly mitigation measures for the FEMA floodplain regulations that are on the site. So I think the funding tie here to the federal government is strong. It's a strong case that the federal government has a lot to stake here, has a lot invested in here already, and going to request more funding still is appropriate. There's over 43 different languages represented at this school. So when I come back on the 26th with the school, we'll share a little bit more of the drawings that we have started to work on with the civil engineering firm. Both the City of Kent and Kent School District have retained civil engineering capacity, outside capacity, and we are working to measure the issue, measure the mitigation measures that could be drawn up on the sites. And we're also looking at the impact on the neighborhood. Given the proximity of this to transit and other areas, I think it's very important that we not leave property behind, that we don't have remnant areas that don't have access to facilities for flood and stormwater. That'll be enabling of a lot of other policies for council and for the state and for the region and for the federal government, which is to have more housing near transit. So we're going to be looking at all of that, and we'll have a larger presentation on the 26th. For today, I wanted to say that this was something staff is coming back for and thinking is an urgent priority for a federal agenda, and an item that aligns well to a federal government request because it touches on so many different issues that the federal government has already indicated support for. Now I'm going to hand it over to Chief Hemmon to talk a little bit more about our public safety requests, since we're talking about emergency management issues.
Council President, council members. So I'm here to talk about the city public safety request for a mobile command post vehicle. Right now, the city and the police department does not have a mobile command post. Right now, if there's a big incident that happens within the city, one of our police commanders will show up with his Ford Explorer, and everything will be done out of the back of his car. And that's all we have. For big events that we've had, like Splash and Corn Days, we have asked some of the RV businesses in town to provide us an RV for the week or for a couple of days, just so we have someplace that we can have officers out of the weather, someplace they can rest and get out of the public view. So this command post will be used for many different things. One thing it can be used for is for pre-planned and spontaneous law enforcement incidents. Those could be anything from an active shooter at a school. It could be for SWAT operations that are going long term. And we even could have used it 2 weeks ago when the state trooper that was shot in town. On that night, there was probably 100 different law enforcement officers that were here running around looking for the suspect. If we had a command post, we'd have a set space that they could come, they could check in, then we could know exactly who's in town, what they're doing with whiteboards and everything else. And right now we don't have that. Another thing it's used for is coordination between different agencies during natural and man-made disasters, floods, earthquakes. A lot of that, if that happens in town, all of our infrastructure is going to have to move up to the hills. And right now we really don't have anything that we can use as a command post like we use the police department for right now. Another thing it can be used for is for training events. They could be used for active shooter training. Every so often we have events at Showware that we have emergency management come in which we have different agencies that are coming in. It'll give them one spot they check into, and it'll help us command the training exercise. It can also be used for special events, for Splash Cornucopia Days, anything in which we need to have a nice, safe, secure location for officers to go to during that event. So what does a command post give us? It gives us enhanced communications. There'll be radios in there, and we can have a dispatcher that actually can just work out of the command post rather than going through Valleycom. It gives us a secure meeting space for the incident commander, the chief, mayor, CAO, and big events that they can go into and meet. It's a secure space for the incident commander to start planning if this is a long-term event, using the ICS system to pre-plan for the next transition of personnel coming in. It has whiteboards, workstations, screens, monitors for the command post to view drone and camera footage, and then also gives us a self-contained power supply with the generator that we'll have. So what's it look like? It looks like kind of what's on the screen right now. That's a large type vehicle. They have medium-sized ones, small ones too small for us, but that's kind of an example. It's usually based on a Freightliner or international type chassis. It's usually a diesel truck with a generator, a large generator in it. Has 2 to 4 bump outs on either side, just to give more room within the inside of the command post. The outside will have awnings to keep the rain off. Has outside monitors, whiteboard storage compartments. Inside usually has 4 to 6 workstations. It has a meeting room with a table for 6 to 8 participants to be in there. Charging stations, AC in the summer, heat in the winter. Storage cabinets, usually will have a bathroom. And then it also gives us the ability during an incident to have, between 6 and 8 different monitors running, in which we can view the drone footage. We can view officer cameras, in-car camera footage, to give the command post a better idea of what's happening really there, rather than just listening on the radio. So that is all I had for the mobile command post.
Thank you. Thank you.
Either one of us?
Yeah, I was just going to say, any questions? No? I think we're all in agreement here. Then I will make a motion. I move to approve the public safety infrastructure and educational federal funding requests summarized by staff and direct staff to apply for or assist in the application for such federal funding.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Sorry, moving on in the agenda. Now, getting back. All right, Councilmember Michaud, we're at Parks now.
Thank you, Madam President. We have 2 items tonight. First, we have the 2024 to 2028 art plan, and we have Ronda here to present.
Hi, Council President. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about the 2024 to 28 art plan. This plan is done annually. We make a 1-year and a 5-year plan to outline how we are planning on spending our city art money, which, as you know, is generated through a $2 per capita ordinance that was passed in 1985. So I think you all have a copy of the full plan in your packets. But just real quickly, this is sort of an overview of the finances of it. Right now, we have an account balance of $662,461. Our annual per capita funding at $2 a person with 137,000 people, that gives us about $275,000 a year. Right now we have quite a bit of administrative expense coming out of this account. Years ago that was not the case, but when the city went through a recession back in the 2010 era, we kind of shifted some of those administrative expenses to this account. So that's what you'll see there. And then you can see our total anticipated expenses for the coming year. Just to quickly walk through the projects that we have planned for 2024. This plan is developed by the Kent Arts Commission and working very closely with our Parks Planning and Development team within the Parks Department. All of the different projects and that they're remodeling parks, developing new parks, we always like to make sure we get some art featured in those. This is one of those projects, the Garrison Creek Park renovation. This park has had art in it for quite some time. We have an art project that's been there. I believe it was renovated in 1997 or 8-ish, and we incorporated art at that time. And that has come to the end of its life cycle, as much of the rest of the park. So we have selected artist Elizabeth Connor to work with city staff and their design team that they're working with to identify opportunities for artwork in the park, and then to also create that artwork. And the cost of that project is $120,000. That was actually approved in last year's plan, so we're just carrying it over. The next one is a new park, East Hill North Community Park, up on the East Hill. We actually posted a call early this year for artists to submit qualifications for this project. We actually received 54 applications, but only 34 were eligible. We constrained it to Washington State-based artists, and 20 were applied from all sorts of places. So we have 34 applications, and a jury is working right now to narrow down the finalists, and soon we will select a finalist and hopefully be able to contract with an artist to get them onto the team to work with Parks Planning and Development and site workshop landscape architects to develop artwork for that park. And the budget for that one is $100,000. We are bringing back our every other year traffic signal control box art wrap program. This is a program that was launched in 2017, and like I said, we've generally done it every other year, adding about 8 or 9 boxes to our inventory. This year we plan to add 8, so that'll bring us up to, well, we have 39 boxes right now, so that'll bring us up to 46, 47. It's too late in the afternoon for me to do math. So that's a total of $35,000. This program is super popular. I am always amazed at how much bang for our buck we get for this. Not only does it, the original reason we started doing it was to kind of prevent graffiti. And so we work really closely with our Public Works Department to identify boxes that are in kind of high graffiti spots, and it really has helped to do that. But also people just really love seeing them around town and always have their favorites, so it's fun to hear people talk about that. This is a new program that we actually started developing in 2023, and it's finished. It's the digital art project. It's planned to be shown at Kersone Park over across the street on the projector that is over at that park now. And it is 7 original digital art pieces by 5 different artists that will rotate in the evening hours when it's dark. We were all ready to launch this program, and we had some vandalism damage to the projector over at the park, so we're hoping that that will be fixed and we'll be ready to roll it out by the end of this month, or maybe early next month. So we're kind of planning on doing that every year. It's only $5,000, just honorariums to the artists for their pieces. So we're anxious to get that rolled out and see how it goes. We always set aside some money in the art plan to purchase new artworks for our portable collection. These are the pieces that you see around the city in conference rooms and hallways and public areas. And the place that we purchase those from is our summer art exhibit, which happens each June, July, August over in the Centennial Gallery. So we have $15,000 set aside for that again this year. The Kent Valley Loop Trail is a project that we've had approved. We have $60,000 sitting in the budget for that. We keep rolling it over because we just haven't we haven't identified the perfect opportunity. We might, there's a couple different ideas. Maybe a permanent sculpture gallery along those trails, or there is also some interest in doing a big mural on one of the industrial buildings if we can get a private property owner that is interested in working with us on that. And sometimes this project money, one of the nice things about this fund is it does roll over every year, and we are a pretty small staff at this point, so sometimes just our capacity kind of limits us from getting everything done that we want to in a year. So that's why you see some of these things rolling over from year to year. And then we're also have $80,000 set aside to put some sculptural elements into the Springwood Park reimagining. I'm told construction is about to begin on that here shortly. And they have planned 2 or 3 pads that will hold sculptures. So once the construction gets going on the park, we'll probably get a call out to artists to develop some sculptures for that park. Of course, we always set aside money for collection maintenance and programming, kind of educational projects or promotions of the collection. We do have a fairly large art collection in Kent. As I mentioned, our ordinance was passed in 1985, so just like anything else, it has life cycle issues, and we need to plan for maintenance. So we're setting $40,000 aside from this year's budget. And then we always like to keep an opportunity fund because oftentimes great things come up throughout the year, whether it's our parks planning and development folks have a great idea. Sometimes we work with economic development. They'll have a cool thing going on that's a perfect opportunity for art. So we like to have a little bit of an opportunity to have some flexibility there. So that's what that is. And then on the last page of the plan, I won't get into all the detail, but it gets less detailed, of course, as we go out for the rest of the 4 years of the 5-year plan. But we kind of identify possibilities for the rest of that throughout 2028 of some of the things that were, parks that we know are going to be developed during that time frame. So you can kind of see. And one thing you'll notice is that the funding starts to dwindle a bit if we're doing all the projects that we hope to do each year with all of the administrative costs coming out of this fund these days. As a staff person, I always joke with our department director, Julie, that it's, we get COLAs as staff, and it's exciting because, of course, everyone likes to get a cost of living increase, but then I realize, oh, that comes out of our project account. So it's a little bittersweet. So I know in the budget process moving forward, we hope to maybe find some ways to address that. And that's it for me. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for this presentation. I really appreciate all the pictures. That helps us visualize the projects. Are there any questions from my fellow council members? No? Okay. I will do the motion. I move to approve the 2024-2028 City Art Plan and authorize the mayor to sign all contracts to implement the art plan within established budgets, subject to contract terms and conditions acceptable to the Parks Director and City Attorney.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, up next we have
Bryan.
I see Bryan is here. Sorry. He is going to talk about a grant, right?
Yes.
Grant application. Welcome,
Yes,
Bryan.
here we're usually talking about grant applications or grant acceptance. So, yeah, tonight we're going to be discussing just real briefly the Uplands Playfield and Spray Park. Got an opportunity kind of early here this year to apply for this grant. This is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Outdoor Legacy Program. So this is our authorizing resolution. If you guys are pretty familiar with these, we generally have to do these for all our grants. So just a real quick reminder, this is at Uplands Park, which is just right over here on the other side of Meeker, in between Meeker and Smith, where we're going to be building the spray park here. And then, yeah, so this resolution basically is you guys, us letting you know that we're applying for this and you guys approving it, saying we're good to apply for it. So this is going to be for $3 million in land and water conservation funding. This is a federal grant from the National Park Service that is administered through the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. And as I said, it's a required part of our grant application. We had a pre-submission meeting review with RCO, and this is kind of a one where they select projects to go forward, and it looks like we're going to be the only project going forward from Washington State for this particular program. So, and then our submission is due on the 27th along with the resolution. Happy to answer any questions about any of the grant resolution if you have it.
Thank you for your presentation, Bryan. I appreciate all the work that you and your team are doing to help fund these projects. Are there any questions from my fellow council members? All right, good luck to us. All right, I will read the motion. I move to adopt resolution number 2070, authorizing the signing and submittal of a grant application to the Recreation and Conservation Office to assist with the Uplands Playfield and Spray Park improvements.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, back to you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Michaud. We're on to public safety. Councilmember Troutner.
Thank you, Council President. Sitting in for Councilmember Boyce, who is the subject matter chair for this committee, I'd like to welcome Commander Johnson. He is going to talk about an agreement with Adamson Police Products.
Greetings. Council members, thank you for having me today. I'm here today to respectfully request your authorization for the police department to enter into a renewed agreement with Adamson Police Products, which is a vendor that we commonly purchase equipment from. That includes like firearms, parts, accessories, holsters, optics, things that we outfit our employees with as they move along with their assigned duties. We've contracted with Adamson in the past. Our current contractor agreement expired in the end of December of 2023. If authorized, this new 2-year agreement it would start on March 15th of 2024 and end on March 15th of 2026. This would be a 2-year agreement. The compensation would not exceed $175,000 during that 2-year period. All purchases with that agreement would be made by utilizing pre-established budgets that's already been approved by council, and the agreement that was drafted and developed was done through our law department. So in summary, because our previous contract has expired and the police department would like to continue to purchase equipment through Adamson Police Products, we're here to respectfully request your authorization to continue on with this new renewed agreement.
Sounds easy. Anybody have any questions? All right, seeing none, I move to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with Adamson Police Products to purchase police equipment through March 15th, 2026, within budgets previously approved and established by council and subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the city attorney and police chief.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And back to you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutner. We're on to Public Works. Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We're going to start off with Jason Bryant, who's going to be talking about a consultant services agreement.
Good afternoon. The next two presentations are actually wrapped into one, same project. My name is Jason Bryan. I'm one of the capital projects managers in the Public Works Engineering Department. Our upcoming Mill Creek 76 Culvert Improvement Project will be the third project on 76 between 212th and 228th. The north segment was recently completed. As with the first two segments, this project will provide a new concrete roadway above the floodplain, providing a durable surface for many years to come in an area with major trucking hub in the city. Similar to the first two projects, this will raise 76th Avenue South approximately 6 feet. This project is designed to help improve the flow of the Mill Creek and will help reduce flooding in the area. This project will include installing 3 new bridges on 76th Avenue. Rigid inclusions will be installed 60 feet deep to help support the new bridge foundations. These shafts are drilled to desired depth, filled with concrete, and then 1 piece of rebar installed in the center. A total of 9 concrete walls will be constructed along the west side of the road. Installation of lightweight concrete fill underneath the new concrete road, and also including installation of new drainage system, new water main, curb gutter, and sidewalks. As a result, I'm here this afternoon seeking the committee's authorization for 2 consultant service agreements with Geo Engineers and JECB Inc. Geo Engineers was heavily involved in the design of the project, including the rigid inclusions and lightweight concrete design. They will provide field support during these phases of the project. JECB specializes in materials testing, special inspection, and quality assurance testing. They will provide field support during the placement of the concrete wall, sidewalk, and concrete roadway. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly introduce this project and request that approval of both consultant contracts. If you have any questions about the projects or the consultant firms, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? Well, getting ready to move another chunk of that work done. So I move to authorize the mayor to sign a consultant services agreement with JECB LLC, subject to final terms, acceptable to the Public Works Director and City Attorney.
I second.
Any discussion? It has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I move to authorize the mayor to sign the consultant services agreement with Geo Engineers, Inc., subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the Public Works Director and City Attorney.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It has been, any opposed? Both motions have passed, so we can get more work done and hopefully stop some of that flooding here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, we're going to hear from Carrie Maloney. Well, Carla Maloney, from Carla Maloney. And this is going to be about the National Highway Safety Asset Management Program.
Correct. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Carla Maloney. I am the Design Engineering Manager, and I'm here today to present to you the WSDOT Award of the National Highway System Asset Management Grant Program Grant for $3,070,000. $3,070,000. $150 million of federal funds were provided to WSDOT to award to agencies that preserve national highway system routes in Washington state. These funds are used to highlight the importance of preserving existing roadway systems and to incentivize agencies to use asset management strategies that provide cost-effective solutions to maximize the life expectancy of roads. Engineering and operations worked collaboratively to identify the project location, scope of work, and in the preparation of the grant application itself. This NHS segment was identified for the grant due to the existing pavement conditions and the preservation efforts that we have taken to maintain the road, such as spot repairs, grind and inlay, and crack seal, most all of which you can see on this slide here. This project will repair the existing pavement by making additional spot repairs, doing more grind and inlay, but we're also going to be including an overlay over all of those repairs that we're doing there. Other work that we are doing will include minor bus stop improvements, the addition of bike lanes on 64th Avenue South, ADA updates to the curb ramps, crosswalks, sidewalks, and we're also going to update the head push buttons that are at those intersections there. Our team applied for this grant in October of 2023. We were awarded, as I mentioned, $3,070,000 for the design and construction of the preservation work along this segment, which is 64th Avenue South, located between Meeker and West James Street. Let's see if I can get this backwards. Between Meeker and West James Street between 64th Avenue South and Washington Avenue North. This is a 100% federally funded grant with no required local match. Public Works anticipates to do construction in 2026. Are there any questions?
Anyone with questions? Comments?
Thank you, Councilmember Fincher. Congratulations, Carla. That's a big accomplishment, and I remember that road is also between schools, so there's improving all pedestrian sidewalks. I mean, I think it's much needed, and I'm so proud of our department for getting funding constantly and working on improving our communities here. So this is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Especially not to have a match, so that's really good. We've talked before about how much happens in the city based on grants, so good work. Anyone else? In that case, I move to accept grant funds from the Washington State Department of Transportation National Highway System Asset Management Program for the 64th Avenue South and West James Street project, amend the budget, authorize the expenditure of the grant funds, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents subject to final terms acceptable to the city attorney and public works director.
Second.
Any discussion? It has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Very well, very nicely done.
Thank you.
And that is it for Public Works.
Thank you, Councilmember. With that, we are at the end of our agenda. We are adjourned until council workshops. We'll see you at 5:15. Thank you. Welcome to Kent City Council Workshop for Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. And we have one item on our agenda for code enforcement, and let's get started.
Hello, thank you. Good evening, Council. I am Victoria Robin, Senior Assistant City Attorney for the City of Kent. And before we get started, I would like to introduce who's here with me tonight to present. To my left, we have Tabitha Solari, Code Enforcement Officer, Lane Farr, also Code Enforcement Officer, Commander Michaud Riley with the Kent Police Department, and Carly Manning. She's the administrative support for code enforcement. So I think you'll probably be hearing from most, if not all of us tonight. I am going to get us started. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about what exactly does whoa, moving the podium with me. What exactly does code enforcement do? And I cannot see that. I'm sorry. I hope you all can see that better than I can. I'm going to be looking up here so that I can read what I wrote. So what we're hoping to cover for you all tonight, and please feel free to interject at any time if any of you all have questions, are the type of issues that are addressed by the city code enforcement process, what departments are involved in the code enforcement process, what challenges the code enforcement team face, and how are cases prioritized. Code enforcement officer, I'm not going to read to you from every screen. What this basically says, code enforcement officer is defined in the Kent City Code as essentially anybody. Anybody in the city of Kent can be declared a code enforcement officer by the mayor, or authorized, somebody who's authorized by statute or ordinance, somebody who's designated by the mayor to enforce any of the regulations in the Kent City Code. But essentially what you're looking at here is our code enforcement team. The City of Kent has 2 code enforcement officers. You all know the City of Kent is huge. You have Officer Tabitha Solari and Officer Lane Farr. Those are our 2 code enforcement officers. They work incredibly hard to cover the entire City of Kent. But there are many departments, pretty much every single department in the City of Kent touches code enforcement in some way. Most of the departments enforce the Kent City Code, and most of them do so proactively. For example, here you'll see the Finance Department does business license enforcement. Public Works Department has the Environmental Engineering Department. They are enforcing portions of the Kent City Code, and they're doing so proactively. The ECD Department has the Rental Housing Inspection Program. The Planning Division, the permit process, is enforcing provisions of the code. The building inspectors are enforcing provisions of the code. Those are all proactive enforcement. The RFA is doing fire inspections and proactively enforcing provisions of the code. And then you have the police department, and those are basically complaint-based violations. They are reactive, not proactive, not because they don't want to be, and I shouldn't say they're not proactive. They are proactive as much as they can be and as much as they want to be, but the reality is with 2 code enforcement officers and the size of the city, our code enforcement team is primarily reactive, complaint-based, and Tabitha and Lane are going to talk to you more about that and about our code enforcement process and how it works. But they are responding to complaint-based violations, public nuisances, quality of life violations, and all of the departments are supported by the law department. Like the changing of the leaves, the code enforcement process does not happen overnight. It takes time, it takes a lot of work, and it takes everybody that you see here working together to get from complaint to resolution. I am really sorry that is so small. I think I can highlight. Kim showed me. That doesn't really get any better. So this is the code enforcement process from a very high level. I want to make that clear. So this would be like high level of a typical case. I would say maybe an easier case from complaint to resolution. So a complaint comes into the code enforcement department, and again, Tabitha and Lane will get into the nitty-gritty, into more of the details, but I want to give you just kind of a high-level look of what the code enforcement process looks like. So a complaint comes in, And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the complaint comes into Carly, into the admin support, and then an admonishment letter is drafted and is sent out to the violator. And it's kind of like a warning notice, a warning letter that goes out that says, hey, we've received a complaint that you have a potential violation on your property. We're going to give you some time to correct this violation. There's no fine attached to this admonishment letter. It's just kind of a friendly, you might have a violation on your property. And that gives the property owner an opportunity to correct the violation. It gives them a deadline to do so, and on that deadline, Lane or Tabitha go out to the property, they check on the violation. If it's there, or if it's not there, case closed, and the property owner doesn't hear again from the City of Kent. If the violation is there, then it moves on to the next phase, which is either a civil infraction or a correction notice. And you'll notice then we're going on one of two paths. We're either moving towards a hearing examiner or moving towards the Kent Municipal Court. I'm not going to get into those into too much detail right now. I'll let Lane and Tabitha do that. But we're either going hearing examiner or Kent Municipal Court at this point. And general rule of thumb is we're going to give them 3 opportunities, 3 civil infractions or 3 correction notice or notice of violation. And then if we're still not getting compliance, we're still not getting response, then we're moving into possible criminal charges. That is high level what the code enforcement process looks like. If at any time the violation is abated, then the case is closed and we're moving on. Again, high level, just to give you an idea of what the monetary penalties look like for a violation. Each violation in the City of Kent comes with a $500 fine per violation. Each day is a separate violation. The payment of a fine does not relieve the duty to abate. That means you cannot just receive a civil infraction or a notice of violation and just say, okay, that's fine, I'll pay the fine, but I'm not going to cut my grass. Yes, that does happen. We'll have people just pay the fine and hope that we go away. We don't go away. Unpaid fines are sent to collections after 30 days. One thing to keep in mind as Tabitha and Lane go through their presentation, and then as we continue on with PD's presentation and when we circle back, is that the City of Kent, as much as residents and we all would like, is that we cannot go on to private property without consent or a warrant. Oftentimes we will get people calling and saying, why can't you just go on this property that nobody lives there? There's an abandoned house. Nobody's taking care of it. It's clearly being taken over by squatters. Why can't the city go on and take care of it? Why hasn't the city gone on and cut down this grass? Why hasn't the city gone and removed all of the drug paraphernalia that's on this property? The city cannot go on to private property without consent of the property owner or without a warrant. There's the Fourth Amendment, which we're all familiar with, but beyond that, there's also the Washington State Constitution, which affords private citizens greater protection than the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Washington State Constitution protects, beyond that, doesn't even care about whether or not the search is unreasonable, requires a warrant before any search, requires a warrant before any search, whether reasonable or not. So I ask that you keep that in mind as you're listening to the rest of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Tabitha and Lane. This middle button right there. Okay.
Hi, so I'm Code Enforcement Officer Solari, and this is my counterpart, Code Enforcement Officer Lane Farr. So we've put together some information just to go over the steps of what we do and how we handle everything. So this is talking about our initial investigation. Complaints come through for a variety of different ways, whether that's our online reporting system, whether we get phone or email to code enforcement, so that could be phone or email through our direct line or through our direct email. Sometimes we also get stuff directed to us from the mayor's office, or as you guys may know, through the city council as well, if you guys hear complaints and pass that forward. Sometimes we'll also have stuff forwarded to us because citizens call the non-emergency line. They don't know how to reach or understand what to do. So they may talk to a call receiver who will then direct them or simply pass on that information to us. We also get information passed to us from Public Works. They use a program called See-Click-Fix. So a lot of those complaints are usually like illegal dumping that people think are going to be cleaned up, but because it's on private property, that gets passed on to us. And then additionally, sometimes we are asked for assistance from other departments such as ECD. So if they're dealing with an issue in a critical area, so they need us to move forward with the infraction portion. With that, With that, for that initial research, once we get that complaint, we're looking at ownership of the property. So who's going to be our responsible party? Is it going to be a business, an individual person? What's the occupancy like? So is it a tenant-landlord situation, or is it owner-occupied? All of those factor into how we're able to approach the situation. And we prioritize response. So just like anything that handles emergency situations, we're going to look at impact size and safety risk. So if I'm looking at an apartment complex that services maybe 300 units, because we do have some very large complexes that they haven't had trash pickup in weeks now, and it's becoming a big health and safety issue, that's likely going to hit my plate first before I maybe go address someone who their property is clean, they just simply don't have active trash services, which is a violation. So we're looking at that impact size to citizens in the health aspect. Here I'm going to let Lane talk a little bit about site inspection and what it looks like for what type of violations we're looking at and how we're able to do those inspections.
Thank you. The upper left would be the accumulation of garbage and debris, and what you would see from a normal right-of-way or a street. Somebody will complain about that property, and you can actually just drive by. You don't even need to get out of the car, take a couple photos, and you can determine that that's an accumulation of trash or debris, along with anything else. If there was inoperable vehicles or something of that sort in that driveway, but pretty much from the front of that property, you know why someone has complained. And then lower left would be one where because we can't go on private property without permission, but a lot of our neighborhoods are all fenced, and we can't see from the street. So therefore, unless we can verify it, take our old date stamp photos, so if we had to go to court, we would probably need the assistance of that property owner. And usually the complainants, believe it or not, a lot of them want to be anonymous. Okay, so we have to kind of talk our way into and explain to them that if you want to remain anonymous, there's not much I can do because I don't have any evidence for the violations. The lower left is taking a photo up over the fence of a property owner, a complainer, more or less, allowing us on his property so I could take the camera and take the photos of the violation of inoperable vehicles parking on the lawn in that certain one there. So with that, if they're still not willing to, it's kind of tough without us being able to have permission, but once they grant that permission, then they're willing to be a witness also in court if we have to take it into court. So we want to make sure that we express that to them. And then the lower right, obviously that's surrounded by a fence, and what that is there's a code that you can't have over 70% of your lot size that it's a impervious material. And the neighbors complained about all the concrete trucks and everything and the work and everything of that sort, but still wanted to remain anonymous. I happened to knock on the door one day and told her why I was here, and she allowed me back there, so I was able to take photos. And it was well over 70% of the yard was concreted. So with that, I mean, that's just kind of the stuff that we kind of do, and we have to verify and we have to document because when we build a case, obviously, we're going to have to eventually maybe go into court and be able to tip the scale one way or the other. And if we don't have that documentation, then that's what we do on each and every one. So.
Okay, so here what you're looking at on the side is what a typical admonishment letter looks like. This one specifically is addressing a concern of accumulation of trash, litter, refuge. I'd say that's one of our most common ones. Typically what happens, so we've gone out, we've taken our pictures, now we're sending this admonishment letter. We're usually including an inspection date, typically about 2 weeks. There are some violations that require us by code to give them more time. This one we were able to give a 2-week notice. And included in that, we're usually giving them contact information, so how to reach us, letting them know that we appreciate them following up with this, trying to really bridge that gap. Our goal is abatement, not to be punitive. Obviously, we want to resolve the issue. With this, we have a case number that's generated, and now we will wait until that inspection date. Now, let's say we went out there, though, and we did our inspection. We weren't able to do either pictures for one reason or another, or we found that, thankfully, maybe some time has passed and they mowed their lawn or they already have picked up the trash. We would simply reject that complaint. So that's why I have there that a case number or a complaint would be rejected. Moving on to the next step. So let's say now we've approached the time where, okay, inspection data's come, we are out there, we're looking at the information. If abated, that's fantastic, right? That is our ultimate goal. We can go ahead and close out the case and no further action is needed. If we do go out there, like you'll see these pictures here, we're documenting a significant amount that needs to be followed up on. It's very serious. So with that, we would now move forward with the next step of issuing what's called the civil infraction. This is what we talked about as far as being through the Kent Municipal Court. I'll go into more detail in a moment about the hearing examiner, but we'll touch on this first. So this is the hearing examiner side of it, so you can see what that step looks like. So instead of doing the infraction, we would then issue the correction notice. So the correction notice tells them that immediate action is required. It goes into quite a bit more detail because that's what's required for the hearing examiner process. They want to see the specific code violations violated, the corrective action that's required. So we would make our suggestion of what they can do to abate this issue in this type of notice. With that, the preparation of this does take a lot more time. And because of this process, we usually reserve it for when there's not an individual party with the Kent Municipal Court. As long as there's a name and a date of birth associated, we can go through that process. If it's a business, so there's no name or date of birth, it has to go through the hearing examiner process, which creates more time and delays abatement. So we do reserve it for typically these situations. This slide is going to show you what a notice of violation looks like. So much like issuing an infraction, the couple of the documents you're looking at here is the notice of violation fine. And then to the right of it, it's outlining how they can respond, just similar to a ticket. So whether they are going to pay it, mitigate it, or contest it. And then in the bottom corner, we also include an invoice saying that that amount is now due. They have now failed to abate the issue, and this is the step that we're at. With these, again, it takes quite a lot to prepare. This right now is just showing you a couple pages, but I worked on this particular notice of violation, and it was 8 pages for the documentation. So just so you know exactly what we're building out and what that looks like. And then with that, if they don't respond at all, after 30 days, fines are then sent to collections. But it goes back to that still doesn't alleviate their requirement to abate. So just because they don't respond does not mean that we then wipe our hands clean of it. We will continue to follow up through the process and if needed, going for criminal charges. An important thing to also keep in mind is the city incurs the cost of the hearing examiner. So if we go in front of the hearing examiner, regardless of the outcome, that is a factor that also we have to consider. That cost falls on the city. This goes over repeat violators. So sometimes you will have repeat violators that are very general. So maybe every springtime the neighbor complains because they just aren't quite fast enough at mowing their lawn. And I get it, we all want to live in a beautiful neighborhood. But if we've sent notice to them before and they've mowed their lawn, it's most cost effective for the city and building relationship with the community member for us to go ahead and send that admonishment letter again and have them abate the issue and resolve it then and there. If we are seeing, though, where we have issued prior infractions or notice of violations, especially within the last 2 years, and under the same ownership, meaning that it hasn't changed hands for the property, that tells us that this person is likely to not respond well to an additional notice. They have been made aware of what the issue is and what we need to move forward with. So most times what we can do is go back out, redocument with our pictures that yes, this still exists, and go ahead and move forward with the additional fines, so court appearance or hearing examiner, without having to do an additional admonishment letter. A general rule of thumb, like we've said, is 3 or more civil infractions or notice of violations would then be referred to for criminal charges.
I can take this one if you want.
Yeah, that's fine.
And this is just kind of repeating what Tabitha had just said. There's a provision of the code, Kent City Code, section 104-220, which just clearly states a repeat violation or failure to abate constitutes a gross misdemeanor. So that is giving us specific authority to charge an individual who's conducted or who's committed a repeat violation or who has specifically failed to abate a violation of the Kent City Code with a misdemeanor. And we file those, I don't want to say all the time, but it is common for us to file misdemeanor charges for people who fail to abate or commit repeat violations. Commander O'Reilly, I think you are up next. This is not the neighborhood response team, but I could not find a picture of the neighborhood response team, and they did not want to provide me with one.
Oh, weird.
So.
Which button do I push?
The middle button.
The middle one. All right,
Yeah.
the big one. Oh, sure.
Thanks.
All right, we'll switch to the next one. That's a nice picture of Commander Mills there. You're looking good. All right, criminal charges. Reserved, obviously, for the most egregious violations, right? Our real vision for this is let's just get compliance, right? Let's provide the citizen with some education. Oftentimes people go, oh, whoa, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize it, or man, I've been out of town. My cousin's supposed to be taking care of that while I'm gone, and it hasn't happened. And often, just like it says, though not always, just having a uniform officer getting involved, just the presence alone, I'm like, oh, I guess they really mean business. What do you mean this can actually be a criminal charge? And yeah, it's serious, and we'd like you to just comply, and thank you for your cooperation. However, obviously jail and or criminal record can be a motivation for somebody to clean up as well, right? Maybe they're already on probation and they've been advised that, hey, if you have one other conviction within these 2 years or whatever your probationary period is, that's certainly a motivator. Removal of unauthorized persons. So think the person, it's an abandoned house, grandfather had passed, the grandson is maybe now taking over and trying to manage it from out of state and things like that. And, through the process of their investigation, they are, Tabitha and Lane are able to finally figure out, oh, well, this person owned it, but he passed. And sometimes it takes a little while to try to figure out who the responsible person is for the property. But once we do that, we can engage in a trespass agreement with whoever is that person, either the owner or the responsible person for the property. And as you guys are aware, it's our trespass agreement. Sometimes we sign up with businesses and things like that, and they authorize us to act as their agent and issue trespass warnings to people on private property and such. So, see if I covered everything. It gives us the authority to remove people. Now, what we're not talking about here, and so we can order them off or issue new trespass warnings, right, to people. Hey, we're giving you a warning. You come back, you can be arrested for criminal trespassing. What this isn't a situation of when somebody enters a renter's or a lease agreement with a property, it becomes a civil situation and they got to go through the normal eviction process. But for these situations, this is when we would get involved and it can be fairly effective. And it doesn't have to be a neighborhood response team officer. That could be any officer, right? We post up the signs, you've seen them around the city and such. Chronic criminal nuisance. Any premises of which 3 or more instances of criminal conduct occurs within a 1-year period. When this happens, and the conduct is committed by the person who owns, occupies, or leases or rents the property, or who is the invitee or licensee or guest of the property, this can go to them. It's unlawful to maintain this, right? So we have somebody who's, even after we've got involved and we provide continued education, we've explained this is what can happen. This is what can happen. It can graduate up to a chronic criminal nuisance. It's unlawful to maintain, conduct, promote, facilitate, permit, or allow a chronic criminal nuisance. And like I said, oftentimes, if it does get to this level, we do get compliance still. Is this still mine? All right.
So criminal charges at the beginning, you might remember when I had showed the like the typical process or the process of a typical code enforcement case. We often think that criminal charges is kind of like what we save for the worst of the worst, right? So we haven't gotten compliance with civil infractions. We haven't gotten compliance with the hearing examiner process. We've tried issuing, we've tried the friendly approach. We've issued the admonishment letter. That didn't work. Lane and Tabitha have tried making contact. We've issued 1, 2, 3, it hasn't worked. So we're like, okay, we're gonna file criminal charges. We're gonna send out a uniformed officer. We mean business. Surely criminal charges are going to work. We're gonna solve the problem and we're gonna make the neighborhood really happy. Doesn't always work. There are still challenges that we face, that the code enforcement team faces with criminal charges being filed. And I think that can be really frustrating, not only for this team, but for city council, for the mayor, for everybody involved, for the community. And some of the challenges that we face, I'm sorry, I have to look up here. I really didn't think it would be so small on such a large screen. So one of the challenges that we face with criminal charges, number one, we still have the issue, we still can't go on the property. Just because we filed criminal charges doesn't mean we can go stomping on the property now and knock down the building as much as we all would like. We still have to apply for a warrant and get it or get consent from the owner. The owner is much less likely to give us consent now that we filed criminal charges against them. The person fails to appear in court and a warrant is issued. We're kind of stuck now, right? So a warrant is issued and nothing is happening on the case. There are not a lot, but a few code enforcement cases that are in that limbo state. And so when we get a phone call from a Kent resident or a city council member or the mayor and say, hey, Victoria, what's the status of that case? And I just say, well, he's in warrant status. There's not a whole lot I can do at that point, right? So we filed criminal charges. We've gone through the whole process and we've done, we've kind of thrown our Hail Mary. We've done what we think was really going to get that resolution that we all were hoping for, but now the owner is in warrant status. So what can we do? So that can be very frustrating. When we file criminal charges, so leading up to the filing of criminal charges, oftentimes I may be having communication with the property owner, or police may be having, Tabitha Lane or an NRT officer may be having communication with a property owner. Once criminal charges are filed, the property owner has right to counsel, and so those communications certainly they have to stop with me, and even with police they have to be careful what communications they're having, right? They can't talk to the property owner about the case, so we have to be careful there.
May I add something?
Of course you can.
So if somebody does have a warrant, we'll just arrest them, right? If we know where they're at and things like that.
Can you go get some people?
We can actually do that. And we're happy to do that. We even get paid to do that. Make Chief happy. Be cop of the month. But sometimes we'll have the person that is the warrant is the cousin or the grandson who lives out of state. I don't think anybody's going to want us to hut and go down to, or I'll go to Cannon Beach, Oregon, if you guys will authorize me to. But and sometimes we just don't know where they live now. We have a last known address, which is maybe that address, which is unoccupied now. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. But if we do know where the person's at, by all means, we'd be happy to hold that person accountable and arrest them on their warrant.
Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that PD was not arresting on their warrants. Thank you for clearing that up. Another challenge that we face with once we file criminal charges is just conveying the importance of code enforcement cases to the community and to the court. It can be disheartening to hear it's just code enforcement. When you're dealing with violent crimes, when you file a code enforcement case against an assault case or a domestic violence case, code enforcement cases are important too. They have impact on the community. And so just conveying that when you're making a bail recommendation or sentencing recommendation, that is a challenge that we face with code enforcement cases. And then I think, Tabitha mentioned, ultimately the city's goal, and I think everybody in this room, our goal is compliance. Our goal is beautifying Kent and cleaning up the property. So even if a defendant or a property owner comes in and pleads guilty on day one or at his first pretrial hearing, but doesn't clean up the property, what have we accomplished? Our goal is not conviction, our goal is compliance. And that is also a challenge of criminal charges, because if you're filing a criminal charge for a code enforcement case against a property owner who has a long criminal history, they do not care that I filed criminal charges for them for having tall weeds and grass. They will gladly plead guilty. So those are some challenges. Not often, but sometimes criminal charges do not solve the problem. But there are more options. And those options, that is not the Superior Court, but I liked that picture better than the picture of the Superior Court. Oh my God. I'm just gonna move closer if y'all don't mind. Okay, that'd be great. Sorry. I didn't realize my eyes were so bad. So I didn't include these next steps on the process of the typical code enforcement process because these aren't what I would consider part of the typical code enforcement process. These are really kind of extreme cases. These aren't part of our everyday code, and they are, they're just more unique. We don't do these. We don't take these extreme measures for all code enforcement cases or for many code enforcement cases. I think we would have to have an entire code enforcement division like we have a public works division or a police department or a law department in order to take this type of case on every code enforcement case that comes across the city because of the amount of time and resources and money that goes into these Superior Court abatement cases. But I did want to cover them with you all tonight because they are important and they are good ways to bring about solutions to problem cases or problem properties that occur in Kent. And you might recognize some of these. So the first is the Chapter 3580 process, which is called the Unfit Dwellings, Buildings, and Structures. We adopted that a few years ago. Some of you might remember that. It's now codified in Chapter 1402 of the Kent City Code, and it's commonly referred to as the Unfit Dwellings or the Dangerous Buildings Code. And what that does is that allows the city to essentially declare a building as dangerous, go through a very lengthy process that starts with an investigation. So the code enforcement officer or the building inspector goes out, investigates the building. By this, if you're looking at this house here, you can, I think any of us could drive by and say, yep, that looks dangerous. It looks unfit for habitation. And then takes photos, calls out a contractor, gets an estimate, drafts up a notice and complaint, or a complaint and notice of hearing, holds a hearing before an improvement officer, which is a city staff person. It is usually somebody out of ECD, like the building official, or it could be the deputy director. Matt Gilbert, I'm looking at you. It is a long process, but it's the importance of it is giving the property owner their due process rights, ensuring that they are put on every possible notice that the city is declaring their property as dangerous and unfit, and notifying them that it is our desire to have their building or structure demolished and removed. We don't do these often. We have done it a handful of times. You all might remember over on Lincoln on that curve, I think it's Smith and Lincoln, I'm not great with streets, the old Command Labor building that was there, that was one that we pursued several years ago, an old vacant building that was there. So the purpose of this statute is to allow us to notify owners that they have a building that is unsafe, unfit for human habitation, should not be occupied, and that we believe it can't even be rehabbed, that it needs to come down, it needs to be demolished. We have an improvement officer hearing, which, like I said, occurs before a city staff person. They are invited to come to that hearing. They're invited to provide testimony. They can provide a written statement. They have an opportunity to appeal that hearing. The first level of appeal is to the city's hearing examiner. The second level of appeal is to the Superior Court. All of this documentation is recorded with the King County Recorder's Office. And the ultimate goal is that at some point they agree that yes, it's more work to go through this process than it would be for me to just hire a contractor to demolish the property. And that's generally what happens. At some point along the process, we get the property owner to just agree and to demolish the property. But the best thing about this process and the reason...
Victoria.
Yes?
Councilmember Troutner has a question.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So you mentioned earlier there's things that we pay for. So all of these hearings, is that at the expense of the city? And then do we pay to demolish the building, or is that the property owner?
The property owner would have to pay to demolish the building. Of course, we're paying for any of the staff time, right? The hearing examiner, we do pay for the hearing examiner time if we have to. So we contract with the hearing examiner. Someone chime in if I'm incorrect about that. But yes, anytime that we pay for sorry? Yes. We would pay for...
The owner pays for the...
The owner would have to pay for the demolishing of the building, correct. But what's great about this process, and the reason that we adopted it, is what's great about it is that going through this process, if they did not demolish the building and we then went to Superior Court, so say we went through this entire process and they failed to abate, we could then go to Superior Court and say, Your Honor, we went through this entire process and the property owner failed to do what they needed to do. Please give us a warrant so that we can go on the property and we can demolish the building. The Superior Court says, okay, grants our warrant and allows us to go on and demolish it. We can then file a lien, and we are now at the same priority as state and local taxes, where previously, had we not adopted this ordinance, we would be wiped out by all other creditors. We wouldn't have that priority. And so that was the importance of adopting this ordinance. We haven't had to go there yet. We haven't made it to that level, but we put in all of that work up front to go through the improvement officer hearing, to issue the complaint and notice of hearing, to do the investigation, take all of the photos. We have a couple in the hopper right now. I would say we do a fair amount. What do you say, Matt? Half a dozen? Yeah.
In what time period are you thinking?
Since we've adopted the code?
Yeah, probably 6. Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. I would say it's ECD more so than code enforcement, PD, that has done these. And so we have 2 currently pending. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Anything you want to add on that before I move on? Sorry to put you in the hot seat.
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. Another option with some problem properties that are outside of the normal code enforcement process are zombie properties. These are residences that are vacated by the owner during the foreclosure process. Sometimes the property owner will get that notice from the bank that their house is being foreclosed on and not realize that they can stay and wait it out. You know, they just immediately vacate. Or the owner is deceased and they were maybe the only person living in the home. We've had this happen a couple of times where KPD actually is called out for a welfare check, finds the sole owner deceased, removes them, and then the property is left unattended. And the bank, for whatever reason, fails to complete the foreclosure process, doesn't take possession, and the house just lingers. We usually find out about it because the neighbors are like, nobody's cutting the grass, the car hasn't moved, or the car was stolen, somebody stole my neighbor's car, and the grass hasn't been cut. Nobody's maintaining the property, becomes an attractive nuisance for transients, squatters take over the property. It obviously becomes an eyesore for the neighbors, and again, we've run into this issue. The city police cannot enter the property, and we can't get a trespass agreement like Commander O'Reilly talked about because there is no owner to speak of. So these are very difficult. They're known as zombie properties because there is no owner. And for many years, these were some of the most difficult properties. But a couple of years ago, the legislature adopted a statute that allowed us to reach out to the banks and put them on notice of these properties in our community. Chapter 7, 100 RCW is called the foreclosure and abandonment of residential real property, the nuisance abatement. What this allows us to do, and it works both ways, banks can also notify us that they have a property in our community. It doesn't usually work that way. It's usually us notifying the banks. But we can tell the banks or the mortgage lender that they have a property in our community that has to meet 3 criteria. It's abandoned, it's in mid-foreclosure, and it's a nuisance. And the criteria for each of those is laid out in the statute. In order to do that, the code enforcement officer must go out and conduct a site visit, identify 3 indicators of abandonment, again, those are laid out, and then take time and date stamped photographs and prepare and sign an affidavit stating that the property is abandoned in mid-foreclosure and a nuisance. And we have to provide proof that it's in mid-foreclosure. And then they work with the law department to send notice, the affidavit, the photos, and all of the materials to the bank, and then we await a response. And I believe the statute provides them 15 days or something along those lines to respond to us. And that essentially requires, or it gives the bank that amount of time to act. And then if they don't act, or it gives them the authority to act. Sorry, I had a bank respond to me and say, we don't have to act. When I told them, okay, now it's on you to act, the attorney responded and said, well, we don't have to. You're just giving me the authority to act. I said, okay, thank you for clarifying. So it gives them the authority to act, but if they don't, then the city can. Again, the city cannot do anything without consent or a warrant. But this, like 3580, puts us on equal rank with state and local tax rolls. So we're not wiped out by other creditors. So by going through this process, we are putting ourselves in good priority.
Victoria, Councilmember Boyd has a question.
Sure.
Yes, Victoria, thank you for the Code Enforcement Course 101. I got a question. So what if the property is paid for? And say we got squatters in there, and the grass is overgrown, there's trash outside, we know they're doing drugs in there, and we can't locate a legal owner. What do we do in a case like that? I mean, they're surely a nuisance to the neighborhood. But like I said, we can't find a legal owner, and the property is more than likely paid for. So we can't go to a bank.
No, and I think that that's a great question. I actually had something very similar come up recently that I think will help explain what we can do in situations like that. So I'll just take that. I ran into a situation where I'm looking at this property. The last owner was deceased. It's obviously being overrun by a homeless encampment. We've got a big problem on our hands, and it's now spreading to outside parcels. So we're looking at a very big issue, right? What we were able to do in that situation was at least go back and say, usually there's some kind of probate or estate settlement, something happens where we went down that avenue. Sometimes if that's not an option, where we can't find a next of kin or someone that would be responsible, then we can look at other options as far as, okay, is there anybody that would be responsible in the sense of, are they paying the taxes? Are the taxes getting paid on this? Where is that bill going to? Because even though I've seen properties where the bill isn't going to a next of kin, somebody cares enough about that property. Sometimes we can go down that avenue of saying, hey, if you care about this, if you're willing to pay the taxes on it, are you willing to take care of it? If all else fails, it is a long, drawn-out process. I haven't seen it personally happen myself. But if we've got no owner that cares about it, they're delinquent on taxes, it does take years, but it can get foreclosed on due to taxes not getting paid, and that goes through county. So we don't have control over that, but there is eventually something that will happen with that property, whether it'll be auctioned off due to delinquent taxes and then can be bought, and now we can follow up with a new owner, or something along those lines. So it is frustrating because there are times where we can't act as quickly as we would like to, but those properties don't always sit forever. There is eventually something that we would be able to follow up on and basically sink our teeth into to address those issues.
Okay, because the reason why I brought that up, because there was a home located over where I lived at that sat there for years, and it was apparent that people were in and out doing drugs. It was vacant. The house even caught on fire a couple of times, but it sat there for 2 or 3 years before they did anything to it. And I was wondering what was the process.
Right, and I could be wrong about this, but last time I looked it up, it takes about 3 years for it to become delinquent and then scheduled for the following year for it to even be put up for auction for taxes. So sometimes we're looking at 4 or 5 years before it even takes over new ownership, and then it's getting in contact. So that timeline makes sense then if what you were seeing is it was sitting for a couple years. That sounds about accurate.
And then, sir, just to add on to that, some of the times we often have sort of cases that are, we're already in the area because of criminal activity. And so we might have police investigation and deploying resources to that area already based upon those sorts of things. And at the same time, sometimes we might have a code enforcement process. Obviously, this is kind of a different situation. It doesn't come up all the time. But we can deploy our resources anytime where there might be criminal activity. So if there is drug activity and things like that, and we're getting put on notice and citizens are letting us know, and we deploy our resources, whether it's somebody who owns the property or it's an abandoned property, we'll go and investigate criminal activity just the same as we would at an occupied property with a homeowner versus an abandoned property with people there. So.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want me to click through?
No, I clicked to this one.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. And just to follow up on what Tabitha said, she's right. So it's 3 years before King County will foreclose. And we have had a property like that where they didn't pay the taxes for 3 years, and then King County did take possession of the property. And we've had several actually, and I think there's one that you just sent over recently and asked us to look into, and there is a probate on that one. So we do have to dig into property sometime to find out who is the responsible person. We've had to track down next of kin out of state. And sometimes we track them down and they say, I don't want anything to do with this property. And they'll sign over consent to us and allow us to get on the property, a right of entry to get on and do cleanup. and we say, hey, you're the next of kin, this is the situation here, and they will let us on and do what we need to do, but it does take some digging. So definitely can be frustrating, but there's usually a way we can figure it out. It just takes time. And the other Superior Court abatement action that we can take is the public nuisance abatement under Chapter 748 RCW. This is one you are all likely familiar with of late. This is an incredibly document, time, and resource intensive option. The goal is to obtain a court order which would require the owner to abate the nuisance, and then if they fail to do so, to hold them in contempt. This requires the work of the police department, the law department, other departments as they're involved, and the community, all working together to help build the case. It takes a lot of time, oftentimes many months, to build the case. Often requires hiring outside counsel to see the case through, and getting the optimal results will take time. And now for the fun part. I'll turn it back over to Tabitha.
So I know we've talked a lot about what we can't do or what our struggles are, so hopefully this will be a little uplifting to see some of our success cases, things that we're proud of and that we'd like to share with you. So here specifically, you're going to be looking over at the left, which are before. Keep in mind our CE involvement, so code enforcement involvement, began in spring of 2022. Now over to the right, you're looking at abatement, which is the ultimate goal, but it took us until late summer of 2023. So you're seeing the time frame there of what took place. This took significant resources to clean up. So not only on the time of the city, so staff members going out there, taking pictures, following up, trying to make contact. I don't remember the exact amount, but the property owner did pay to have this cleaned up to the tune of about $25,000 to have a company come in and clean it up. So that is something that we face as a hiccup when dealing with properties. A lot of people don't have that kind of cash to just dump into cleaning up a property. And so sometimes they get disappointed that it's gotten out of hand and they go, oh, I don't know what to do anymore. And that's why these can take time. Again, our ultimate goal is to work towards abatement. This particular place also had issues with health and safety. There were many people living in that encampment. It attracted very bad behavior. It was right next to an apartment complex where, of course, children live. It was near a school. You can see how that snowballs into being a big problem. So this one we were quite proud of. This one, it's kind of a multi-step abatement. So over on the very left, you see the initial involvement. We were on and off from about spring 2020 until fall of 2023. It started off pretty bad. What you don't see in these photos is right across the street was a children's tot lot park. So we had drug activity. There was a school bus stop that picked up right there every morning. So this became a high priority for that reason. We actually ended up working with the property owner to get them in touch with King County. We like to try and get people in touch with resources that are available. King County does have a program where they're able to offer trash vouchers due to financial limitations or reasons that property owners need help with cleanup. So we've got them in touch with that. We had done that a couple times. And so that middle picture, you're seeing things get better. Still not 100% because we still had the activity of people in the area, and that this became a hotspot. We knew that they were associated. Ultimately, what honestly solved this was they decided it's too much work for us. We're going to sell this property and let a new owner take over. Now, of course, we don't want people to feel pushed out of their home, but we want them to feel supported also in making that decision. So it ended up being to their benefit. They worked with DCYF because they had children in their house. That helped them figure out what their next steps would be. So again, we were reaching out with other entities, not even just within the city. A new owner took ownership of the property, has since cleaned it up and plans to put it on the market. So again, we're seeing a huge improvement. This one I'm actually going to let Lane talk about a little bit because he knows the before, and then I know a little bit about the after. So I'm going to pass this to him.
Well, the after's easy, right? This is one that's been going on probably before I even became into code enforcement, which is 19. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, this is one that we actually filed criminal charges and a warrant was issued and the owner left for Dubai. So this is one where I kept asking, what's the status? What's the status? And he's in warrant status and KPD won't arrest him.
I'll go.
And in the meantime, once this thing started getting together, the surrounding properties were starting to be developed as far as sewers, roadways, everything we could, find. And then you're trying to, in the meantime, the house obviously there appears abandoned. And then what happens is the people that aren't supposed to be in there go in there. And finally here in the last 6 months, it finally, because of a structure fire, made it so bad. In the meantime, I had issued NOI or civil infractions, and I believe NRT had gotten involved with that one or not, with criminal charges. So there was a warrant, that type of deal. And so finally, again, why? Only because probably it was burnt beyond repair, and it finally was demolished. And then the like say the bottom picture, it's such a nice lot now. So, but like I say, if you're talking 2019 to 2024, it's taken a long time for this, let alone all the complaints that we've had from the people that see it and drive by it and everything of that sort. So it just takes a lot of time. But we are persevering to make sure that it gets happen and have it happen. So, is there another one?
Yeah, I have more.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
This is Tabitha's.
You want me to talk about it?
I can talk about it.
It's fine, I'll talk about it.
It's a lot of trash.
It is a lot of trash. So I put together some apartment complex cleanups for you as well. I think oftentimes when we think of like accumulation of trash, we think of that lazy neighbor that never takes care of their property. But the reality is this happens in all sorts of situations. So the apartment complex you're looking at here, they had a management changeover. During that process, they fell behind approximately $15,000 on their Republic Services bill. Republic Services had wanted to continue doing services. They eventually got to a point where they're like, you owe us too much, and that's fair, that's understandable, but that prompted us to step in. This happened, of course, if you all remember, in summer of 2023, we had a terrible heat wave. So you can only imagine what this smell was like, what this environment like, the kind of wildlife that was attracted to it. And obviously, very understandable that Kent residents were upset. And again, we're talking about apartment complexes, so think about how many units, how many families, how many people impacted. This is a situation where we went through the hearing examiner step. I got to the point of sending a correction notice, and thankfully they got in touch with us. They were willing to work on it. I think it took all about a month for them to get all caught up on their billing and get services restored. This one is another example. So on the left, you're seeing they used to have these partially opened garages that were kind of used for storage. People had broken into and pulled out pieces, made a mess there. Their 40-yard compactor had broken, and then they had also failed to pay for services. So there's multiple things happening here on this property. After us getting in touch with them, it was the almost same situation. Management had changed. We see that happen with apartment complexes all the time. And in the process of the compactor breaking, they were looking at hopefully just keeping that one little dumpster to service that entire complex. So then you get into, yes, they have trash services, but is it also appropriate for the size that you're dealing with, right? Is it enough? So in this situation, again, code enforcement got involved. We reached out, and thankfully, through the steps, they did want to abate the issue. And now you're looking at the cleaned up property. The last one here, just to really emphasize too the size. So I have 2 pictures of the before. This complex had a total of 11 dumpsters that were all like this. Very large. We're talking about 290 units. You consider in those homes, there's often not just one person, right? We're talking usually a parent, child, or multiple people living in there. So that 290 quickly multiplies into several residents that are impacted by this. This one was a little bit more difficult. We ended up going down the road of sending out the notice of violation. Thankfully, at that point, while they did go ahead and reach out to us, they reached out before responding, so we were able to work with them to get everything caught up, make sure that this was abated quickly in a reasonable manner. And in this situation, because we got them to abate the issue and they showed that they've continued to stay on top of the issue, we actually went ahead and removed the fine, knowing that they were going to keep up on this. Because again, this is a perfect example of we are willing to work with them as long as we are reaching abatement. We want to not only reach that abatement, but maintain it, not simply just be punitive. And I happened to be by, my after picture was actually taken just a couple days ago, happened to be by and was happy to see I was trucking along behind Republic Services as they were emptying all the dumpsters, so they've definitely kept up on it, which is great. That particular apartment complex, like I said, it was very large, very impactful to the community, so this was another one we were quite proud of. And then from here, we'll turn it over to questions if you have any. And then we've also highlighted kind of the preferred methods for complaints to come in, so it streamlines getting them to us and getting them to us quickly. So we have our online reporting link that is right there through our website, the email that gets sent through Carly so she can disseminate to Lane and I as appropriate, as well as the phone number. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Any questions for the team? Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you all so much for your presentation, the entire code enforcement team. I appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. My question is, what is your workload like? Like, how many cases are you dealing with on a typical day or week?
So that varies greatly. I wish I could give you a concrete answer, but just to give you, I guess, kind of a broad picture. So sometimes we have like those big critical cases that are coming through, like those apartment complexes. So I might be devoting a day or multiple days on that. So there are going to be times where my caseload might be juggling 20 to 30 complaints because I'm working on more serious issues. The reality is, I think between Lane and I, we're juggling quite a few usually if we have just kind of your typical code enforcement cases. So that can be anywhere from 40 to 50 that there's somewhere in a status of something's going on, whether it's we're waiting for the inspection date, we've talked to the property owner, we're waiting for them to make abatement, or now it's in the court system and we're kind of waiting to see how that plays out if we're going to move forward with additional fines. So hopefully that kind of explains that it varies, but about what we're looking at.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll thank you all. Thank you, Victoria, Tabitha, Lane, Commander O'Reilly, and Carly for being here. Thank you for this one-on-one review for all of us, and it brings, and for our community. A couple of questions, I guess, kind of quickly, if you have the answer. Otherwise, we can talk about it offline. Like, how do we work with the individuals who are not able to financially take care of a situation? How are we supporting them and working with them? And for individuals who probably don't speak English and don't understand the notices that are sent to them.
Yes, so we have our phone number that is on there. So speaking, I guess, I'll go in reverse. So as far as the language barrier that has come up, my Spanish is not great. So I've tried. It doesn't work. We utilize Language Line. So that is an option for us to be able to talk to people and communicate. I've also reached out. We have a record specialist who does speak Spanish. We have other city members who speak various different languages. I'm just using Spanish as an example because it's probably the most common one we've come to, where I've had them help draft some information for me to send, because again, we're wanting to make it easy for them, and we want to support our community and also help as much as they can. So there are a lot of options. And then of course, if it gets to the point where they haven't contacted us and now they're in court, there's obviously interpreter options for when they're there. So they're happy to work with them on that regard. When it comes to the financial aspect, I can touch on part of it because I know how it impacts with my level of what I do. So I think I mentioned before about reaching out through programs like the King County trash vouchers. That one's probably the most common that we come up with. I know I showed you like the large scale cleanups. Usually those apartment complexes, the money is there. It's a matter of them putting it where they need to be. With that one property owner who had the large cleanup, he was able to make it work. It just took a long time to get there. So it's also that time span. But most times what we're dealing with on the code enforcement level are the smaller scale where they need help because maybe they've lost their job. Maybe, unfortunately, right now their health isn't the best, so they're working lower hours. They just don't have as much. And we certainly don't want them to be in a situation where now their choice is, do I take care of the trash in my lawn or do I pay my mortgage, right? So that's why programs like that exist, and we help as we can. Victoria can, of course, interject if she'd like to or if I'm wrong, but my understanding too is when they go to court, they have an option to mitigate. So if they're looking at the fine and they're saying, I can't pay that, but I would like to work towards abatement, there are options for them to work that out through that process, and maybe you can touch more on that.
Yep. So once they get to court, oftentimes they're in court because they haven't had any contact with Tabitha or Lane. And so that's sometimes the first communication that the city has even had with them. Before they even talk to the judge, I'm conferencing with them, or the prosecutor in court is conferencing with them and finding out, hey, why haven't you responded to these notices? And often it is because, well, I didn't get it, or I didn't see it, or whatever the reason is. But I can get rid of the car, or I can cut the grass. As long as they commit to abating the violation, they say that they want to take care of it, then we say, great, we're going to set your hearing over 30 days. I'm going to have the code enforcement officer check your property before the next court date. If they tell me that it's abated, I'm going to dismiss the case. And so then there is no fine. I mean, they can mitigate it, like Tabitha said. That's certainly their choice. So they can come in and say, I don't want to come back to court. Can you just reduce the fine? I won't reduce it if I don't have proof that they have abated the violation. But if Tabitha and Lane go out to the property before the hearing and they tell me, yes, they have abated it, the grass is cut, the vehicle is gone, whatever it is, then I just dismiss it, because our goal here is compliance. It's not to penalize them. If they're a repeat violator, I'm probably not going to dismiss it. I will give them a mitigate, if they have abated the violation but they're a repeat violator, I will give them the reduced fine, because I want them to take it seriously. I want to make sure that they're not going to violate again. But if they just need a continuance and, whatever the reason, if they're not a repeat violator and they just need a continuance, I'm happy to give it to them. I'll see you again next month. I'm going to send a code enforcement officer out to your property to check it. They do that, and then they let us know, and we just take care of it at the next hearing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then I guess what I'm thinking of is for if a person whose car is not working anymore, right? They don't have the money to get it fixed. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the money to get rid of it, because you do have to pay to get rid of your cars, as far as I know. And they don't have the financial means to do that. But so, I mean, do we do anything to help them in that, or do we work with them somehow? Like, I'm just thinking of families who might really be in this situation because of financial, or I don't know how often you see that, but just kind of thinking of an example.
Come up. It hasn't usually gone to court, because what has happened, we give them as a courtesy, we give them the 2-week period, and then they'll contact us. We obviously give them a way to contact us, and then we talk. If financially, the financial issue comes up through that conversation, of course, we work with you. And what we'll do is extend it out another couple of weeks. We'll talk about options. I mean, whether you want to donate the car, is the car you were speaking that way. The dump vouchers, ICE's, we can go through King County. We can get up to 3 vouchers for 3 loads of trash, anything of that sort. But that usually, those conversations are pretty, they're not big to us. We'll work with people, but if that comes up, we will work with them to get rid of the trash. And what we normally, I'd say probably 95% of the time, if it's a financial thing, through the time that we've allowed them and the fact that they're continuing to work through it and showing progress, it really hasn't become an issue. And I can say that probably 95% of the times that it's not, like I say, a punitive, because obviously we don't have any funds or anything to give him or anything of that sort, but as far as an outlook, those are the things we can, but I think the main thing is the fact that they work with us and we work with them, and it usually gets taken care of.
Thank you.
Those aren't the issues I'm seeing in court, so they must be taking care of them.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. I think that is it. Thank you so much, team. Thank you. I really appreciate all the work you do, and thank you for coming down here tonight. And we are adjourned until 7 o'clock.